Okay, good evening. Tonight, Dr. Rodrigo Onofre will be talking to us. He is currently a postdoctoral research and extension fellow in the Department of Plant Pathology at Kansas State University. He grew up helping his family on a coffee and dairy farm in a small town in Brazil. He completed his bachelor's degree in agronomic engineering from the Federal University of Brazil, and then he moved to Florida. He completed his PhD in plant pathology at the University of Florida, focusing on disease management of strawberry powdery mildew, including the use of fungicides and ultraviolet light for disease suppression. He came to K-State in August of 2020, and where he's doing an applied plant health research and extension that focuses on corn, sorghum, and soybean diseases. Tonight, he's going to talk to us about soil-borne diseases, particularly those of corn and soybean. Rodrigo?
Well, first, thanks for the invitation, Gretchen, and thanks for the introduction as well. Let me go ahead here and share my slides. Oh. See? Yep. Can you see my slides?
Yep, looks good.
Just get it here. Okay. Yeah, so as Gretchen mentioned, today we're going to be looking over corn and soybean soil-borne disease. And what's really important about this disease, it's they're yield limiting, right? So it's important for us to have a clear path and strategies for this upcoming season, which is about to start. We're going to start with, actually, we're going to just remind you, if you haven't shared or haven't liked our page on Twitter or Facebook, make sure to follow us there, because I'm currently posting the latest information, and it goes straight to Twitter and also Facebook. So make sure to follow me there and keep updated of the latest research and extension information. Okay, so as I mentioned, today we're going to start with corn, and we're going to be looking to Fusarium stalk rot, some nematodes, charcoal rot, and then we're going to switch over to soybeans, where we're going to be looking to Phytophthora root rot, charcoal rot again, which can infect both crops, SCN, which is the Soybean Cyst Nematode, and also SDS, which is the syndrome death sudden syndrome death. So my first question here is, why are soil-borne disease so successful, right? We hear over and over they're yield limiting, but what's the reason behind it, right? Why are they so hard to control? And number one, it's because they survive in crop residue, and they will be in that soil for many, many years. So if you're doing corn on corn or soybean against soybean, and even rotations between corn and soybean, there's a high chance that those soil-borne disease, they will persist in the soil. Also, they are able to infect and colonize a wide host range of plants. We're talking about not just regular crops, but also certain weeds, cover crops, or even, like, as I mentioned, if you're having soybean on corn or sunflower or some of those row crops rotation, they doesn't help to reduce the soil-borne disease. Actually, it might increase. You need to be in the watch for that too. And when we're thinking about those diseases, some of them, such as Phytophthora and Pythium, the nematodes that we hear over and over, those are very important because they also are mobile. They can move in the soil. They have the Phytophthora and Pythium, they can swim when there's like water in the soil and move to the next plant or find that next host to infect and colonize and multiply. Those diseases are associated with plant stress, which can be not just mechanical, which is driving a combine or a sprayer application throughout the field, will cause some wounds in the roots. It will open a wound for infection and colonization of those pathogens. wet and dry conditions can also be they're the opposite, but also may favor the development of certain of those soil-borne disease. It's hard as well because they occur in patches in the field. It's not just systemic throughout the fields. You might see, for example, in the lower areas of the field, or in locations where there's poor drainage, or under certain conditions where you see like the draw or those wet. A wide range of temperature and a limited chemical control that's not available right now, right? There's a very few chemical controls that can be used, and they're gonna be applying seed treatment. So starting with corn, the first one that we're gonna be going over here is called Fusarium stalk rot. This disease is relatively easy to identify in the field because when you split that stem, you're gonna be seeing this reddish. Let me push my. So if you ever wonder if you have Fusarium stalk rot, you split that stem, and you're gonna see here this reddish coloration in the middle of that stem and these shredded aspects too, which it doesn't look normal. This disease can overwinter in corn residue. It's favored by high temperatures above 80 to 100 Fahrenheit. It will cause some premature death, which will lead to the lodging of the plants. So when we're thinking about management, putting everything together, right? What we could do is avoid making those wounds in the roots, which avoid root damage, control the insects, which will favor the wound on the roots, other disease and weeds as well. So in case of the weeds, they're not surviving, other voluntary weeds in the field. And also, if you have this disease and you know that may cause lodging, if you time the harvest, might also you reduce that yield loss that might happen in case lodging comes through it, or like in case of a high winds by the end of the harvest, right? So you just try to advance that harvest a little bit. And then the next, just to show you how important this disease is to Kansas, in the past 5 seasons, an average of 6%, this disease caused 6% of yield loss in average here in Kansas. As you can see, it was up to 8% causing disease loss and 4% here in this past 5 years, but with average of approximately 6%. And again, here I just show you how it looks in the field. And even though that this caused 6% in Kansas, in one specific farm and location, it might cause much more than 6%. So here again, I have the yield loss estimation, and here I have Fusarium stalk rot. So this is number one disease, a soil-borne disease here in Kansas. And then number two, what we have, it's the corn nematodes. And this is a group of nematodes that can cause yield reduction. Root lesion nematode is the number one in Kansas, causing yield losses. The damage can be over 40%, which is very high when we're thinking one specific area. And it's easy for you to understand just looking at the middle picture here, where we have this big patch where we have poor germination, poor lodging, poor stand, right? Like our stand is very poor here. We see like very few plants germinated, also some stunting. Those are all very characteristic of corn nematodes. On the roots are gonna be very poor aspects, right? We'll see some browning of the roots here, which is where the nematodes are feeding. Some plants may also show like some yellowing, discoloration, or chlorosis, which are all associated with the corn nematodes. Again, the root system will be severely affected by the corn nematodes. And the best way to manage corn nematodes is by monitoring population. Going to the fields, sample your fields. And for corn nematode in specific, the best time for sampling is 30 days or 40 days approximately after the germination, right? When the plants are still small, you're going to collect one plant with the root and some soil and send it to the lab here at K-State. And there will be more information about that too. Seed treatment focusing the nematodes are also an option for you if you, in case you know that you have corn nematodes in your area. So again, this is the same graph, right? So here I have the yield loss estimation in Kansas. And here now I have nematodes instead of Fusarium stalk rots. As you can see, in the past 5 seasons, the nematodes cause approximately 4.6% on average in Kansas. That again doesn't mean that in your farm could be 4.6, it could be much higher or much lower. It depends. This is just an average across the state. This picture here is just to show you how it looks again. Those patches and rounded happens not just across the whole field, which could, but more like in patches across the field. Here we see poor or uneven stands, some stunting, and endured patches, right, as I mentioned. So now moving to charcoal rot, which is the #3 disease, a soil-borne disease, very hard to manage here in Kansas. It will cause some premature death of the plants. And what's very interesting about this disease, it will cause this shredding of the stem, right? If you see here, it doesn't look right. It looks very shredded. And also, you can see that there's this black structures in the middle of the stem here. And those are called macula sclerotia. And even though that this has a very different name, those structures are the ones that are going to survive in the soil. And they can survive for many years. They can survive up to 10 years in the soil. So what are the favorable conditions, right, when we're thinking about charcoal rot? Charcoal rot is favored by high temperatures and low wet conditions, which related with dry stress. So if you have a dry stress and high temperatures, that's the perfect storm for charcoal rot. Our management's recommendations right now, it's choosing hybrids with good standability. Charcoal rot is very hard to manage because it can infect several different hosts, including weeds and row crops again. So if we rotate with soybean, and you know that you have a problem with charcoal rot, that will not help because charcoal rot can infect both corn and soybean. In the past 5 years, here I'm showing again the yield loss estimation in Kansas. Now for charcoal rot, we see here across Kansas, it's a very low yield loss caused by charcoal rot. It was below 1%. However, it is important to remember that this can be a case by case, location by location pathogen to be in the watch. If you know that you have charcoal rot in your farm, it is important to think for the next season, what can I do to help to reduce the disease pressure, right? And here again, I'm just showing you a picture of the shredded stem and also some of that structure that will survive in the soil. So still not sure about all of this disease, right, that I show you here. So here again, I have Fusarium stalk rot, charcoal rot, and the root lesion nematode, which is the #1 in Kansas. So Fusarium stalk rot, it's a disease. This disease here, we're going to be seeing across the whole growing season. However, late in the season, we'll be able to see more and more this reddish, purplish coloration here in the stem when you split that stem. Charcoal rot, when you split it, will not be seeing the reddish coloration. What we're going to see is the shredded and black structures, which will survive in the soil. And then the root lesions, besides the stunting, stunting that will be caused, some patches, yellow corrosis. The lesions here on the roots are very clear, as you can see here. When you pull those roots, it will be a very poorly developed root system. We're going to be severely affected. And those 3 diseases can persist in the soil for long periods of time. So that's why it's important to know and identify the right disease, what's happening in my field, right? If I'm still not sure, I suggest contacting your local K-State Extension office, and they will go to the fields and help you out to identify, collect the sample if they need to, and send it to us here at the Plant Disease Clinic. If you'd like to send it a sample, if you have a sample and would like to send it directly to us, you can go to this website here, which is our Plant Path K-State Disease Diagnostic Lab, and print the form and send it to us. Root lesion nematode, it is important to remember that the best time, it's about 30 to 40 days after emergence to send us the plant, and make sure to send us a plant with soil to the lab so we can extract the nematodes, see if they're present, see the population. For charcoal rot and Fusarium stalk rot, what we need is just, if you cut the stem and send it to us, you can shake that soil off and just send it, and we'll make sure that we're identifying or make sure what you have there at your farm, at your location. Now, we're gonna switch to soybean. And soybean, again, those soil-borne diseases are very important because they're gonna be yield limiting. They're yield limiting diseases, right? So we wanna make sure that we know what we have, if we do have anything there, so we can have the right managements, the right strategies for this season. And again, we're in the right time to be thinking about those soil-borne diseases for this upcoming season, right? So if you know that you had some problems last season, now it's the time to plan with the right variety or right hybrid for your upcoming season. We're gonna start with Phytophthora root rot. We're gonna be going over charcoal rot again, now in soybeans, and soybean cyst nematode and sudden death in soybeans. Phytophthora root rot was a problem last season, especially in the southeast part of the state, right? Where we are right now, probably where you are right now. So it's important for us to remind of how this disease looks like, how to manage this disease. So Phytophthora, it's known to cause dumping off in several hosts and several plants, but also not just the dumping off that will cause the death of the plants. Phytophthora is also known to cause those brown lesions, as you can see here in this picture, in the right here, taproot on this area here, and also can be like in the stem up here. It can cause this dark brown lesions. It survives on crop residue or in the soil for many years again. And this disease is very interesting because it will not just produce the regular spores, they can swim. And if this plant is infected with Phytophthora and we have water conditions, the wet conditions in the soil here, the soil is saturated, warm temperatures, this disease can move from one plant to another plant and start that patch that we're going to be seeing. So if we are planning now our planting, right, our planting date, you know that you had problems with Phytophthora and the conditions are warm and the soils are saturated, it might be an option to wait a little bit that soil to drain to plant prior planting. So it's again commonly in poorly drained areas, this Phytophthora problem here. Just to show you how it looks, Phytophthora can be a problem not just when the plants are still small, right, after germination or during germination, but throughout the season. And this happens because supposedly that you planted, right? Conditions were dry, There was no, soils were not saturated, but then later in the season, we had the very wet conditions. That might trigger or might be favorable now for Phytophthora development. And as you can see here, we see several plants being affected later in the season by Phytophthora. So it's something, again, to be on the watch, to know and identify. Proper identification is crucial for disease management, right? So you want to make sure that you send us the plant and we provide the right diagnostic for you in management recommendations. So as you can see, this disease occurs in patches as well as one of the characteristics of the soil-borne, right? Perhaps the disease started right here in the center of the patch, and those swimming spores start like moving over and over the next plants, and or even with tillage, right? You're just spreading more and more of that disease. And I'm gonna bring it back here, our yield loss estimation, right, for Kansas. The last graphs I was showing the average of the 5 years, but here now I'm showing you how much Phytophthora caused in 2018, 2019, and 2020. As you can see, Phytophthora has been a very consistent, causing very consistent yield loss in Kansas. This disease, again, last season we saw a high incidence in southeast Kansas, which might be much higher than 1.5% here, that what we are seeing for Kansas. So it is important to know your numbers and to know if you have this disease in your field. You can always check here this link for more information, the Crop Protection Network website. They have very good articles for where you can go and learn much more about it. Management strategies, right? Avoid planting into saturated and warm soils. If you have problems last season, you might wait a little bit until those soils are drained. There are some resistant varieties that you can choose. Improve soil drainage, and that could be just a tillage could also help for focusing that soil drainage, right? There are some seed treatments specific for Phytophthora, and in this case, we're going to be targeting the oomycetes class, right? The oomycete groups, which are part of the Phytophthora or Pythian, and the products, active ingredients, right? We're going to be looking for methanoxan, metalaxyl, or ethaboxan. I always have trouble pronouncing those names, but those would be good seed treatments if you know that you had Phytophthora problems last season. Now, switching for charcoal rot, I know charcoal rot, it's a big problem, especially it was a big problem last season. We're going to be talking over why was it, but I want to call your attention for, I'm not sure if you can see here, but we have several green plants surrounded this red circle here. But right in the center, we have one plant that looks dead, but we see that all the leaves are still hanging here on this plant. And this is very characteristic of charcoal rot. The plant will die, however, the leaves will remain attached to that plant for a certain period, right? Charcoal rot is favored by hot and dry weather. Dry stress will cause the premature death, as showing here in this picture, which will lead to lower yields, can infect many hosts, as we talk in corn. Now we're talking again. So if you had charcoal rot problem in soybeans, planting corn, that will not help to reduce disease pressure. Avoid high seeding rates. And the reason behind it, it's just because you want to avoid that water competition, which might lead to some dry stress between plants, right? And if you cut that stem right under the surface, not too deep, you can also find those black structures which will survive in the soil for many years. And they are called, again, macula sclerotia, as we saw in corn. In this graph here, I thought was very interesting. why did charcoal rot in the past season, 2020, increase it so much in comparison with 2019 and 2018? And if we think about last season, what we saw is right like mid-season, late season, we saw very high temperatures and dry stress. And that dry stress at late season was just perfect for charcoal rot development. And that made the yield loss estimation jump from almost below 0.5 to more than 3.0% across Kansas. There were certain regions in Kansas that were heavily affected by charcoal rot last season, and it caused a significant yield drop for those locations, right? So if you had charcoal rot last season, we need to think about what we will do for this upcoming season. And here, just to show you this field, it's here in Manhattan at the North Farm. And we see here right in the center, very affected by charcoal rot, but all of this yellowish here, it's caused, that's showing here, it's caused by charcoal rot as well. So management, right? If you have plant no-till, help to preserve the soil moisture and avoid dry stress, control of weeds and insects, because you want to avoid the root damage and opening wounds for the pathogen to colonize and to infect our fields, right? Reduce plant population. Again, avoid dry stress between plants. If you have the chance for irrigation, might be a good option to supplement that water. And any practices that preserve that water will be a good option. Cover crops, in the case of mustard, Gretchen here can talk a lot more about it, might be a good option to help to reduce the pressure of charcoal rot in the fields. Rotation with wheat for 1 or 2 years might be a good option for charcoal rot management. If you do corn or sunflower, that will not help because those are hosts for charcoal rot. So keep it in mind, having the right identification really helps for those management decisions, right? Now, switching gears from fungi disease to the nematodes again, now we're going to be talking a little bit about soybean cyst nematode, which is also called SCN. As here in this first picture, we see here this yellow whitish structure, which is a female on the root, right? Very attached there and pushing all those nutrients from the plant. And that female, as it matures, it will develop on what they call the cyst, and the name of this disease, right? Those yellow cysts here are younger, and as they get more old and mature, they will get darker in coloration. Within each cyst, which was the female, right, there will be lots of eggs that will germinate and will colonize new and new plants. It's important to remind that soybean cyst nematode, they can survive in the soil for over 10 years as well. Again, that importance, right? Like, why are they so important? They can survive in the system and be sitting there and waiting for the right conditions to infect and colonize for long periods of time. Even though that soybean cyst nematode, sometimes we're going to see some patches in the field as a characteristic of soil-borne disease, most of the times the crop will be looking green and will look as normal. That's why this disease is very important to know your numbers, because low levels of SCN may not produce visible above ground symptoms. And the only way to identify this properly is taking a soil sample and send it to us in our lab here for us to know if it's present and how much is present in your field. Just for you to have an idea of how is the SCN soybean cyst nematode distribution in United States, everything that's red and blue, it's present and it's confirmed. Now, if you give a little zoom up in Kansas, up to 2020, January 2020, was present in 59 Kansas counties, which are responsible for more than 85% of the total soybean production. And why it's important? Because soybean cyst nematode is called a silent yield killer. If you don't take the test, if you don't know how it looks in your field, you might not even know if the yield that you're not getting or the yield that you're hoping to get doesn't happen, it's caused by SCN, and it could be. So if we look in the past 3 seasons here, we see that it's a very constant, it's been very constant over the years in terms of loss caused by the SCN, right? So the best way, again, to manage this disease is starting with what's your number, right? And right now, we're having a free sampling program offered for growers here in Kansas. So if you're part of this call, make sure to send me a message, an email, and I can send you the bags for you to check your fields. And now prior planting is the best time for you to go out and sampling. And because if we know that's present and supposedly the numbers are high, you might have to switch a variety or go with a more resistant variety. If the numbers are low, it might you might not have to do anything right now, but it is important for you to know and understand what's your numbers. So if you could just put in the chat there, have you ever tested for soybean cyst nematode before? Yes, just throw an A there, or B, no, I do not grow beans, or C, no, but I'm planning to test this season. And then if so, please send me the information, right? Let's see here. Yeah, no, I do not grow beans. If you plan to grow beans, even though it would be good for you to test your fields and see if it is present, because we can run the soil tests here and see if we find any cyst nematode in your fields. Okay. So another disease it's increasing in the past seasons, right? It's called sudden death syndrome, or SDS. And this disease, it starts with this yellow discoloration here of the leaves. And as it develops, right, we start seeing some necrosis more and more until at this point here. Why this disease is so important, right, and why we're seeing more and more? It's a soil-borne disease, can survive in the soil for many years. And actually, what we're seeing here in the leaf, it's not the disease, not the pathogen. It's actually just a toxin that's being produced by the fungi in the roots, and it's being translocated to the leaves, and it's causing this necrosis. So if you're there in the field scouting and you see these symptoms, it might be confusing with a leaf spot, and you might apply a fungicide to control that disease. However, it will not be effective because what we're seeing here, it's not a disease, it's just a toxin that's causing this necrosis. After causing that necrosis, as you can see here in these soybeans, the leaves will drop and will cause a severe defoliation depending on how bad it looks in the field. And this defoliation might be a great yield limiting for your crop during that year. The yield loss estimation in the past 3 seasons being very low. And I think this disease, it's more like a case by case. Overall in Kansas, the yield loss, it's low, but if we think about the river valley and locations where it's present, yield loss can be up to 30% of the total that it could be, the potential, right? So Now, let's try to understand just a little bit more about this specific disease, right? This disease, it's in the soil, as I mentioned, and it's favored by temperatures between 59 to 63 Fahrenheit with high soil moisture. So here is between VE, germination, emergence, to V3 is the moments where there will be happening root infection and colonization. Between R1 and R7, if temperatures are around 77 Fahrenheit and we have a rain event or irrigation, this disease can start showing the foliar symptoms. And then that will significantly affect your yields. So it can be present in the field. However, if the conditions are not right, we might not see any symptom this year. But with the soil-borne disease, they might be present in the fields for many, many years. So it's important, again, to identify and know what you have there. And just to show you how bad that the management starts right now, right before planting, here we have yield on this y-axis here. And then in the bottom here, I have different varieties, right? And if we look into these three first varieties here, the orange is disease and the purple is yield. So we see here, I have high yields and low SDS, low disease, right? So when we look into the four last varieties, I have high SDS, my orange bars are very high, and my yield, the purple ones here, are low. So we see here a 30 bushels lower just by choosing, right, the right variety here. We could increase this yield in about 30 bushels in comparison with these varieties here. So that's why management starts now. If you know that you had SDS problems, choosing the right variety, it might help to manage this disease. So SDS, as I mentioned, variety selection is a good way to control and manage this disease. However, it takes more than that. The soil-borne disease, they're very complex, and it takes a management, integrated management strategies, right? So planting date, avoid cool and wet soils. Fields with SDS should be planted last to try to avoid those low temperatures and saturated soils. Tillage might help in case you have soil compaction or problems with water permeability. It might be a good option. Rotation, soybean and corn does not help to reduce SDS because even after several years, SDS might be still in your fields and can infect corn residue and survive there. Although SDS does not cause any yield damage in corn, it can survive in corn. Resistant varieties and cultivars, as I mentioned. And there are some seed treatment that can add an extra protection for this disease. And two good options are Elevo and Saltro. They're good options as seed treatment if you know it's present in your field. So if you still need help with a corn and soybean disease or issue, do not hesitate to contact your local K-State Extension office to work with them. And if you want to submit us a sample, you can also go directly to the website. Here's the link. You can just click here, and that will open a sheet where you can fill out all the information and send it to us. The shipping address is right here. So during the season, just make sure to send us that sample and have the right identification. So with that, I would like to say thank you very much. Here's my contact. In case you need to contact me, please feel free to send me an email or give me a call. I'll be happy to talk and learn more what's happening there.
Great. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. That was fascinating. I have a lot of questions. Does anybody else on on the talk have questions for Rodrigo?
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my first question is, does flooding move these diseases around?
That's a very good question. Claudia, it does move them, especially if we think about like soil translocation, right? We can, if we have like a higher area in your field and it gets flooded and that water runs through your field, it might be moving all those soil-borne disease across it. And you can even see patterns actually during the season where that water went through it. And if we do sample, soil sample for those diseases, we might be able to identify them.
Okay, and then this is, I didn't say that I was asking about corn, but this was a question that I was thinking about when you were talking about corn is, can you have all three of the diseases you discussed about corn in one field?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. It depends, right? There's definitely potential for that. In case we talk about charcoal rot, Fusarium, and the nematodes. Yes, unfortunately, we could have the three of them. So what's really important, Claude, it's the nematodes after 30 days, right? If we do sampling, send us that young corn to the lab with some soil, we can determine if the nematodes are present, and if they're present, how much. Then if they're not present, you cross one out for a while, and you keep scouting and watching what's coming up, right? Then as we move through the season and the temperatures are hot and dry, that means that we might have problem with charcoal rot. So even though that we might have the three of them in our field, it will depend on the temperature and rain that they will trigger and develop and colonize our fields.
Okay, thank you. That was a good answer. This has really nothing to do with anything, but do you have these same soil diseases in Brazil?
Yes, we do. Soil-borne disease, they're everywhere. And it just, soybean cyst nematode. Soybean cyst nematode, let's, I guess, in the terms of Fusarium, right, in corn, we're talking about corn, it's just, we see it everywhere. And in specific soybean cyst nematode, we see that even waterfall can move them from one location to another location here in the United States. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Interesting. Good. Does anybody else have any other questions? I have a few questions about management, kind of a bigger picture management thing, in how to manage soil health to better manage the diseases. And that's kind of one of the things that we did with the charcoal rot. The mustard we used is not the weed mustard that the weed guys want you to control. It's actually a high glucosinolate mustard. So it's a very specific mustard, kind of like turnips also have high glucosinolate. What the hypothesis is that the glucosinolate is what is reducing the charcoal rot colony forming units in the soil. So my question then is, how can we manage these soils in a more holistic way to manage the diseases? One thing about charcoal rot, I think it was either my first or second year that I was here in Kansas, and I was working in many fields throughout all of Southeast Kansas. Every field I went in had charcoal rot in it. It's almost endemic down here. So these diseases are in the soil. They don't go anywhere. They may show up at different times depending on what the weather conditions are. But how can we manage these soils better? One thing I wasn't happy to hear is tillage, because I'm trying to do more no-till. But can we go to a different system? You know, like I say, we're kind of stuck in the rotation because of what we'll sell, but it's, you know, can we do cover crops? Can we do different tillage? How do those big picture items change our disease portfolio that we have down here? Because we do have a pretty healthy disease portfolio. By that, I mean, we're bad for diseases or good for diseases, depends on how you look at it. But
yeah, I guess looking into the soil aspect, right, and putting everything together is certainly a very complex answer. One thing that we can think, I believe it's the different soil types that we have, right? We know that the nematodes will prefer a more sandy soil, and then charcoal rot and Phytophthora, they will prefer, and Fusarium, they will prefer a more clay soil. I think it goes back to Claudia's question as well, like, can they all be at the same time? Yes, it may happen, but I think increasing our organic matter and trying to preserve our soil characteristics, and trying to put everything together in that bucket, right? Not just doing one thing, or not just thinking Chile is my solution. It could help, but it also could hurt. I think it's, as you said, like, it takes a lot of things together to preserve that soil health, right? Like, to bring it together. And
okay, interesting, good. Yeah, it's a challenging thing, because when you think of cover crops, a lot of times what you're trying to do is increase residue. Well, if your critters are living in your residue, you don't want to have a lot of residue there. So how do you manage that? Another question, we do a lot of integrated production systems down here. So folks will run cattle on the corn stalks, for example. Do you have is there any information on how cattle might be changing the disease structure?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Well, two things. One, on the cover crops that you mentioned, it's important to know what you have in your field, right? And as you mentioned, cover crop might help, but also might hurt, because the disease might be growing in there. But now, and make sure to send us the sample so we can help you to identify it. But now the cattle, and again, it depends of, I think, what we have or what disease we have in the field. Being a soil-borne disease, they can be moved from one location to another location by cattle. And if you have some of the nematodes or charcoal rot in one location, cattle can also perhaps increase the distribution. So it will depend. It may increase or may not. So I guess it goes back to our management strategy, right? And if you have to, perhaps we might need to think about something else for manage that disease to help with the big picture, right?
Okay. Is it possible? I've actually had guys call me up and try and sell me a bucket of microbes. You know, the soil health microbes. You know, soil health is a big buzzword now. Is there a way that we can improve the microbial structure to better manage the disease organisms. Kind of like if you're getting a cold, you
Yeah.
take a lot of vitamin C. Can we do it again? It's a very holistic approach to disease management.
I guess it goes back with increasing, as you were mentioned, the organic matter in the field, preserving the moisture, trying to take very good care of that soil. I believe, yes, we could increase the microbial population in the field to help suppress those diseases. Although, if we, again, like depend, like we have Phytophthora in the field, so I guess it will be a case by case strategy. But I think cover crops could help increase the microbe population.
Okay, good, good, thank you. Well, that was a fascinating discussion. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, Rodrigo, thank you very much. This was fantastic. Thank you very much. Good night.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks.